Thank you, Brody and Jane. Okay, for at least 3 years, I've heard so much about some amazing work being done by a bunch of renegade engineers at Liberty Mutual, a large American mutually held insurance company. By all accounts, these engineers, who are based in Ireland, were among the first in the organization to get real applications running in the cloud using technologies very different than one typically found in a risk-averse enterprise those days. But they eventually would help elevate the productivity of over 6,000 technologists at the firm. Not only did they help modernize the technical practices across the organization, starting with their e-commerce site, they also helped create the AWS Cloud Development Kit serverless patterns, which was widely adopted not just within the company, but across the industry, even being heavily promoted by AWS themselves. It was made popular because it made writing serverless applications so easy and understandable for developers. So last year, I finally got to meet some of the people behind this effort, who were leading a team of over 500 engineers in Belfast, Ireland. I was so excited to finally meet him, especially since he was introduced to me by none other than Adrian Cockcroft, who wrote this amazing, gushing introduction letter. And I am so delighted that they will be codifying their learnings into a book that will be published next year called The Flywheel Effect. So here is David and Michael.
Thanks, Gene. So my name's Dave Anderson. I'm a technical fellow for Bazaarvoice. The story I want to tell you is really about space for innovation, how we made that journey from the last few years till today. I'd like to introduce my colleague here.
Hey everyone, I'm Michael O'Reilly, an architect with Globalization Partners.
So myself, Michael, and our third amigo, Mark McCann, working together probably for about 13, 14 years ago. And back in Liberty Mutual at the time, we were working a lot of kind of e-commerce sites, big systems, but on-prem. And we were really lucky to be in a position in Liberty Mutual where the move to the cloud was starting. And this was back maybe in 2013. I just took a CTO role in Belfast and had a small team of architects. And we started to look at the landscape, and we could see there was opportunity for a huge change in a Fortune 100 company. This is an opportunity you don't get every day. So we Wardley mapped out what we think might happen, and it was clear that there was a different cloud application architecture approach that we could take. Huge risk. It turned out to be serverless. We didn't know that's what it was. We didn't really know if this was actually made sense. Massive personal risk. With any big risk like this, a lot of middle management push back, say, why are you doing this? We had the conviction to press on. It was almost like a poker game where you can see there's one hand that's going to pay off big, but you have to play it. So we started to bring in some of these practices like serverless, well-architected, engineering, secure by design, all these things that were to become very good practice, but at the time we didn't really know. This diagram was something we drew out at the time to try and make sense of this this thing we were trying to do, this sort of almost like a system we were trying to create within a huge organization to basically reimagine engineering for the whole enterprise. A massive ask for like what I would call a small office sitting in Belfast. About 2019, 2020, we had achieved a huge amount of success with this serverless first strategy. We actually started to coin it a service first enterprise. The network effects that we were starting to see were starting to come true. And all the weak signals that we had seen back in 2013 were starting to kick in. And like anything, the numbers didn't lie. We were starting to see massive returns on some of the risks that we played off maybe back in 2014, 15, 16. And I put this diagram together to try and explain what we had actually achieved because it was so difficult, because cloud application architecture is so hard to describe. And once I drew this diagram, I actually called Adrian Cockcroft from AWS. I showed him this diagram and said, do you think this approach makes sense? Because I haven't seen it anywhere else. And he says, no, this is absolutely brilliant. You're leading the way with the way you're thinking here. And to say the least, I was shocked. So we described it in 4 layers. Foundational was basically our key engineering approaches, which are kind of bread and butter stuff. Then we wanted to layer in our cloud kind of expertise, security, infrastructure as code, and certification. Then have an opinion, be opinionated about architecture, serverless first, to be well architected, focus on cost, have an organization strategy, have a clear North Star business metric, and then organization team topologies, be organized for success. And then finally, acceleration. How do we scale that across 6,000 engineers? With CDK architecture patterns, specific innovation practices, evolutionary strategy, encourage teams to pave their own way. Code is a liability. Try and get engineers to write less code. And then evolutionary architecture. Try and get the concept into the business that we are always changing these systems, which is quite difficult. There's lots of really good stories out there about Liberty Mutual. I would actually Google Liberty Mutual serverless. There's a whole bunch of case studies. Michael, you were there those years. I mean, what stands out for you in this picture?
Yeah, no, thanks, Dave. I mean, I love this. I love this diagram. It brings back some awesome kind of memories. But certainly, like for me, I was kind of go back to the foundational, because I think that really, set us up for a lot of the success that we went on to achieve. Working with the teams, helping the teams really become data driven, and by that, like, understand what measures are important to them, both from a business perspective, also from a technical perspective. How are they able to add value? So when you kind of enable your teams to understand their mission and their purpose through the data, it then makes a lot of these other things easier to kind of integrate and drive within the organization. For example, I know we're going to look at serverless first org strategy. So this is a building block that was within the diagram. And really, we coined this because obviously we were operating at scale. We're a large organization. We've got dozens and dozens of squads, product squads, different types of squads. But we tried to distill that down into something that would fit into teams' heads. But really summing it up, this is kind of the metrics that we use to help create teams that maybe didn't understand their purpose or their mission and maybe working on the non-differentiating type work.